Okay, so we have we talk about causal and resultant refuge. So causal refuge is like when we formally or informally take Buddha, Dharma, Sangha as the objects of refuge. That we've talked about the value of doing that. So we take refuge in of course, the historical Buddha in terms of the Buddha's teachings, but also the Buddha's example of what is possible. So the example of the Buddha as a teacher, taking refuge in our own spiritual teachers who guide us, and taking refuge in the community of the followers of the Buddha. So we have talked previously about that being at one level the Arya Sangha, those who have cultivated realizations in their mind and have very kindly offered the commentaries on the Buddha's teachings to make it accessible to us. So all the lineage lamas and so forth that we go on to study more and more familiarity, Lama Tsongkhapa, Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, all of these in our tradition, Lama Atisha and so forth. And so we look at that whole lineage as, Arya Sangha. And then at all of those levels, we went down to looking at conventional Sangha. And so that's the causal refuge. In other words, we take that, hopefully in this lifetime, because we never know when we're going to get this opportunity again, and as quickly as possible in this life. And it, sets our direction. Okay, we label ourselves, okay, now I'm a Buddhist, now I'm following the Buddhist path. We don't announce it to the world. Being a Buddhist is being an inner being. It's being our own, it's got nothing to do with anyone else. It's being our own inner practice. Of course, if one takes refuge and we have a responsibility to uphold, let's say, the reputation of Buddhism. So if we tell our partner or family or so forth that we're Buddhist and we keep engaging in negative behavior and we don't seem to have made any difference. I mean, we're not perfect, but we don't seem to have made any difference in terms of going in a good direction. It's like, well, like you said, you're a Buddhist, or, people start to, well, what is it all about? If you, I can't see any benefit for you. I can't see you having improved or so forth. There's no pressure because we are works in progress, but it's saying, we make a commitment, to restrain ourselves from negativities and so forth. Okay. So just looking at that a little bit more. So when we do take refuge, that preceptor that we take refuge with automatically becomes a teacher. And then you receive the instructions, say in a refuge ceremony, and thinking that whatever instructions we receive are blessings of the Buddhas on our mental continuum, being transmitted through the transmission of vows, or, the refuge vow, which is one vow, but then also comes along with that, with the Pradamoksha vows, the vows of individual liberation. And so it comes through the transmission of the vows and the advice of the teacher. So even though, for example, Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche has, left behind the mortal body of this life, still we have so much on the FPMT website, advice from Lama Zopa Rinpoche for absolutely everything, pretty much imaginable. At one point, it was many years ago, it came out in the book Dear Lama Zopa. So questions that had gone to Rinpoche and the response, like frequently asked questions, and so they're all grouped under topics. But of course, there are many, many more vast teachings, not only of, and we had Geshe Zopa here giving advice to the center, giving advice to the students and so forth. And course, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And of course, we can't follow all that advice all at once, but we take it on board little by little. We need to have a sort of realistic expectation of our spiritual progress. I guess the fact that we keep coming back is we see some incremental change or see the value of that in our lives, which is a great basis. So being realistic, it actually means how much effort we put into study, how much effort we put into reflecting on the teachings, debating them, reading commentaries and so forth, discussing with others, and then bringing them into a meditation practice. And, really connecting with our own inner experience to strengthen that, so that then we ourselves are developing the qualities of Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, of, 3 jewels, or as Rinpoche says, 3 rare sublime ones. They're not like mundane jewels. So from the very beginning, it's important that we have trust and faith in our teachers. And of course, way back in the teachings on the relating to a spiritual teacher, we talked about what we're looking for in terms of qualities, and once having checked them out, and once particularly having the confidence to take vows, then we see them as a teacher. They've given us, like if we take refuge vows, that's a basis then for taking other vows beyond, So they've given us that foundation. I like to think about it, even if it's like, the kindergarten teacher teaches you the alphabet, and that becomes a foundation for all your learning, right? And our Tibetan lamas, I remember at Vajrayana Institute, when early time when Geshe Thubten went back to India, and he bought shoes for all his teachers and to take with him. And it's like, Geshe, why are you buying shoes? Like, India has shoes. I didn't know this was a tradition for the lamas that they buy shoes for their teacher. I didn't know. And he said, yes, but these are Australian shoes. But that's what they do, I'm not saying they only buy shoes.
It's something material.
Something material, like Geshe Thubten would talk about at Sarajay. He saw his teacher, every day or every couple of days. Whenever he went to see his teacher, he always took the teacher something. He always offered something to the teacher. Of course, then his teacher would ask him, did he have any questions? And he didn't. If he said no, he'd send him back to study more. Okay. So we need to put our effort into study, reflection, meditation, so that it's the only way we can develop on the spiritual path. As the Buddha said, I can't implant my realization into you. I can't wash away your negativities. All I can do is show you the way. In other words, teach, right? And the world continues to benefit from that, right? So from the very beginning, it's important that we develop that faith, that confidence in the teacher, and thinking, how does that benefit my mind? How does that help me develop my own wisdom, through the study, the practices advised by the Buddha? So if we commit to relying on a teacher, then we do get the benefits of the blessings of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And so we can visualize any advice as coming directly from the Buddha, directly from the Buddha's words, the teachings, the Dharma, and so forth. Yeah. And also with our, we talk about Sangha. Of course, Sangha, the word literally means community. So without putting ourselves on pedestals, we can think about the importance of this, our DB Dharma community. At Chenrezig Institute, they a few years ago, they had a sort of brainstorm over afternoon tea because it was always on weekends, and you had morning tea and afternoon tea, and in between we had teachings. And brainstorm, said, we're going to call ourselves the Dharma Jewels, right? And that name has stuck ever since. So when people come in, they join the join, which says, you can add me to the email list, the Dharma Jewels, which is great because they've cultivated a nice community like that. So that's really important, that we have each other as our Dharma community. And also, just like with a teacher, not focusing on their faults, because we will find them. And we're very good at doing that sort of thing in life, but counteracting that negativity of mind and focusing on their good qualities. I was just thinking when it wasn't the 80s, it was later than that, the 90s. And we'd go on these staff developments, and used to go to retreat places for our staff developments back in the day. It was a bit of a flavour back then. I'm not sure about now if people do that. And we always had things like a secret admirer. And so you'd leave gifts for people. I don't know if anyone's had that. It's particularly associated with workplace. But, you'd have, everyone would be allocated a person they were the secret admirer of, right, so that everyone got a turn. It wasn't everybody chose one person. Yeah. So, somehow like that. And you would leave gifts for them, which could be a flower, it could be a nice message or whatever. And they didn't know who you were, so you had to do it in secret. And then at the end of the week, you found out who your secret admirer was. But it really makes a difference to your heart.
That's my question. It was a benefit.
A great benefit, because it makes a difference to your heart and your connections. And another thing we had was, just that. Writing, when you were the recipient of this, it can be uncomfortable, but, people putting up on the board what your good qualities are, and for everybody in the room. Yeah, anyway, I guess part of those team building exercises we had. It was very, very effective, I thought. So we're not going to be doing that here physically, but we can in our minds, thinking of each other's good qualities and the fact, that we're coming together as, we have for some time, also for looking forward to seeing each other and to, engaging in this together. We're not just a bunch of individuals randomly coming together, that we do have, the karma to be together. We've been together in past lives, who knows what context. But it would be a Dharma context, obviously. Maybe we're in monasteries, nunneries, or whatever together. Look at that. And you think, by focusing on our own good qualities and those of others, it's a much more powerful mind that then, can propel us further on our spiritual path, of each other here, but especially in relation to our spiritual teachers. So the idea of, taking refuge is part of an aspiration to say, again and again, not just this life, in future lives, may I have, all the conditions, precious human rebirth, all the conditions to engage with the Dharma, meet the Dharma, take vows again. One of the causes for this precious human rebirth, keeping in mind, is having in the past practiced good ethical conduct in the context of having taken vows in the past. So we can think, I've done this before, and I made a commitment then to meet the Dharma again. Now I can take vows and continue on. And the vows are really helping us to engage in the sort of behaviour we want to do and refraining or restraining ourselves from those that we don't want. And also it's said that even like taking a vow is something that, repeat after me, yes, and then you make that commitment. But it's almost like it's got substance, not a physical substance, but a weightiness that blesses your mind, so that even when you're asleep, say take the vow of no killing, then even asleep, even without the intention not to kill while I'm asleep, I mean, I can set that intention before I go to sleep, then without even being conscious, because I'm asleep, you're accumulating the virtue of refraining from killing. So that's how the vows work. So of course we can all decide, I don't want to kill, and we've looked at the karma module and we can see the reason why we want to take the life of any living being. As the Dalai Lama says, that human beings are the greatest killers on earth. If you think about it, how many different, now it's sort of like recipes for insects and I don't know, just about everything that lives apart from humans. Because we know you're going to be thrown in prison if you're found killing a human, except if you're in the army. Yeah, so when we do take vows or decide, I want to become Buddhist, so I want to, take this step. Generally, it's this idea of setting ourselves up as, not to say we're not a good person already, but to continue to practice ethical conduct and more deeply, making an effort to change ourselves for the better. And if we don't have that purpose, then there's not much benefit. I'll just say that because I have witnessed refuge ceremonies where people have come along just for the refuge ceremony. You never saw them before and you never saw them after. It happens a lot with empowerments as well. And they're taking vows there as well. And it's just like, okay, well, let's hope it was a blessing on their mind in terms of maybe that'll ripen sometime later and they will follow a spiritual path. But if we don't put the effort in, it's not like, oh, now I'm Buddhist and da-da. Just ask all those people who were born into Buddhist families, became Buddhist at a young age, and they say, yeah, but I don't practice. Like, I don't know how to. I don't know what to do. I go to the temple and make offerings. Great. That is fantastic because you're getting a blessing of all the Buddhas. But in terms of developing ourselves, we have to put it in. So just on that, when we do take refuge in the Buddha, then the practice, one of the practices is to view, I'm looking at statues and tankas and so forth, as the actual living Buddhas. So we've got so many objects in this and think they're all living Buddhas and make prostrations to them and respect, make offerings and so forth. So we never criticize an image, a Buddha image. So we regard them all as emanations of the Buddha. If if people are choosing to get one particular statue or tanka or whatever over another, like on our pilgrimage, we were in Nobalinka in Dharamsala, and where some of these ones are from. It's up from Manjushu, I can tell it from there because they're appliqué. And I was with Geshe Sampton and saying, talking about the faces of some of them, and from an artistic point of view, he's going, oh, very good, not perfect. But we're talking about the artistic point of view when you're choosing to get one or the other. And it's sort of like, it's not about the Buddha, it's about the artist. So it might feel like semantics to us, but just to train our mind to think like that.
As in, that artist is very skillful, that artist perhaps not so skillful.
Yes.
But all the Buddhas perfect.
Buddhas are perfect.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So you don't say, oh, well, I don't even want to say what you don't say. So when we do take refuge, we have those 5 pranamoksha vows or basis of training to be that restraint. So of not killing, not taking life. So we have looked at that. of course, not killing a human, but taking any life of any living being. Why? Because they have Buddha nature, and having Buddha nature means they're potential Buddhas, and we're cutting off that, we're cutting them off. It's not like they won't, it's not their potential, it's the damage to our souls. So, and then of course of that, on top of that is not asking someone else to kill, because it's like double whammy. You get the karma of killing plus the karma of asking someone else to kill, causing them to kill. And this can be, okay, we can see that with armies, generals and so forth, world leaders sending other people to kill en masse, to kill other people. But we can just think in ordinary everyday life, if I just think about this is really tricky. If I call the pest control people, right, I'm causing them the karma of killing, even though they've decided this is their job. And their thinking is not like that, obviously, because they took up that job. So yeah, that karma of killing. So I'm causing them to do the killing of those beings. And this can be very difficult. At Vajrayana Institute, we did have to get pest control, because when we first moved into the place where it is now in Asheville, the altar that's now installed wasn't there, and so we had a temporary altar, and so we had tables like we have here. And one day I was making, setting up the table for all the offerings, and I just couldn't get it even. And then I moved it and looked. It was a big mound. The floor was literally a mound. Anyway, so what to do, in the weeks where the person who had done the building inspection and somebody else were debating whose fault it was that they hadn't found them beforehand. I just thought, okay, we'll just get down there and make prayers because the floorboards were exposed for a week or two, and took down little Buddha statues and, saying prayers and mantras and so forth before the pest control people came. And then just thought during Geshe-la's teachings, they're getting all these teachings in the meantime, telling them not to come back as termites. It'll only happen again. I don't know if they can hear these things, but your motivation's good. So you do whatever you can in the context that it was either it's going to be a termite mount or it's going to be a Dharma center, right? Which is more benefit. So, of course, we do have those dilemmas in life, isn't it, to make those decisions. Yeah. So we can think that, as humans, of course, we have greater power than animals. It doesn't say, therefore you can kill them all, but we also have the power to benefit them as well as much as we can. We have animal blessings. Actually, I don't know if we've had one here in recent years. Actually, come to think of it, because it's usually around St. Francis Day, which is, or World Animal Days, it's now called, I think, 4th of October. Right, we might have to put that in the calendar. We have all these practices for animal liberation, for blessings of animals, take them around the prayer wheels, stupas, so forth. So we do what we can to, of course, benefit them. And of course, the opposite of killing would be what? Saving the lives of beings. So hence the animal liberation practices and so forth. And so we have, as humans, infinite capacity to train our minds in virtue. Animals are very, very limited. Yes, they can do. We see all those cute videos of, one, I don't know, cats looking after, they look after dogs? I'm not sure. Yeah, cats looking after dogs, dogs looking after cats, and they raise up and they think they're the other one. I've heard that about many cats who think they're dogs. don't think they go wolf, they can't, but anyway. And in terms of lying then, so the root downfall for that would be saying that you're enlightened, you'll have realizations that you don't have. If you have realizations, of course you can say the realizations you had, but most of those who do have such humility that they don't say anything. So I just steer clear of anyone who's going to make claims like that. So in terms of so in terms of lying, I was just looking at, so we have the vow at the cutting it by the root, which is saying you're enlightened. And then we talk about receiving a downfall. So you're not completely cut that vow, which is telling ordinary lies. And so I think, you might think, oh, well, I can't take refuge because I'm going to tell ordinary lies. We are works in progress. It's not making an excuse for telling lies at all. And of course, we have the examples of where the greater benefit is, like the deer hunter or the person saying to the deer hunter, when they asked, have you seen the deer? Yes, went that way. When you know they went that way. Okay, that's a simple example of you're saving the life of the deer, plus you're stopping this person committing the karma of killing that deer. But they'll probably find another deer, but you're doing your best. And so in terms of stealing, it's taking what's not yours, basically, what's not given or what's not yours if it's not yours. There's this Lama Zopa Rinpoche, he gives a more detailed commentary here in Preliminary Practice of Going for Refuge, which is in the bookshop out there. It's just going to...
Not taking what's not freely offered, is that the word?
Yeah, or of what's not offered to you. Or, we might have here freely offered, right? And then, yes, please take. And we have to put the sign there because people won't take it unless you say, please take. Even then they may not take, but at least you put the sign. Just look at this. And then if you talk, as we've talked about previously, you think about what's the heaviest karma of not taking. For example, taking from Sangha, ordained Sangha, taking from your guru, taking from the Buddha, offerings that are made to the Buddha and we take for ourselves. That's why we have, when we have the food offerings, and we have a mantra to say, so we don't incur that fault. So we say that mantra 7 times and blow, and it's sort of like we've now made I was going to say contaminated the offering, really, made it ordinary, and then we can have. So it's okay then.
Is that why during COVID, the foods all had to be
covered? Yes, and I think they should be still covered, actually. Well, there's a few reasons. One was, but certainly during COVID, if there was like people put vegetables, I would just sort of blow in the general direction, not near. Yes, right. Things like that. But I think even now, because we learned a lot from COVID, and actually I keep forgetting to mention it should be covered, if it's like not open packets of things, whereas we used to just happily have many open packets of lots of things. Like we had, when was puja? Yesterday. We had puja there, and the only open things, oh no, there were a couple of things open, but well, because it was mainly vegetables and fruit. So, yeah, easy.
You wash them anyway.
We know how to wash them well now. So, for example, with the stealing, without permission, taking or using Sangha's possession for your own use, rather, yeah, for your own use. Interrupting the offering of even $1 as a donation to the Sangha due to attachment. Yeah, so there's different ones there. And sexual misconduct is, as we discussed previously, cheating on your partner or cheating with someone you know to be in a relationship, because we know how many different problems that's going to cause. It causes disunity, it causes, families to break up and so forth. Okay, going back to the notes.
So things like pedophilia and all of that are they are included.
That's often included in the one on killing as a lesser vow of killing. If you think about it, not literally physically taking a life, but having just read this morning about in the newsfeed about some of these cases and the effect on people's whole life. It's sort of like robbing a life in a way, yeah. So you haven't physically killed them, but like the impact it's had is often placed under there rather than under the sexual misconduct. Yeah.
Yes, no, I'm sorry, because the act of violence, it's not at all.
It's a violent act. And same with rape, as well. Yeah, it's violent. Yeah. So, of course, it doesn't, the sexual misconduct one, like our previous Refuge books referred to, and it was correct, like what it was saying was correct, using the wrong orifice. And the history of that was, because I asked a teacher about that, and she said, go and check the history of that, which I did. And it was at the time of the Buddhas, women being anally raped. And so it was to prevent, that's not on, right? So, yeah. So when Lama Zopa heard that, therefore, gay people were not taking refuge because they thought it meant them, they were condemned. He said, take it out then. Simple, right? It didn't mean that. So this is where we also have to know, where do these vows come from? Why is it so? And they've all got a history. Of course, killing one, I think, is pretty clear, at least in terms of human beings in our societies, non-acceptable. Pedophilia, rape, all of these things we know. Yeah. Okay. So then once we take refuge, as Arya Sangha says, to rely on excellent persons. Excellent persons are those of, good behavior, good ethics, and so forth, whether you're your teachers or not. But, if they're teachers, you want to also, as we looked at previously, check them out that they're authentic in an authentic tradition that we feel comfortable with, so forth. And listen to the sublime teaching. So on one level, we could say, well, what we're doing here is following the Lam Rim, the graduated path to enlightenment by Lama Tsongkhapa, Lama Atisha, and then as expanded by Lama Tsongkhapa and so forth. So we study those texts, sublime, but we can also say the sublime teachings are the ones on emptiness, wisdom realizing emptiness, which we haven't really gone into yet. and then to fix your attention properly on the teaching. So this is where we come in, we set our motivation, we want to listen with an open mind, with an interest and engagement, and with an intention to cultivate those qualities within ourselves, to intention to put it into practice. And cultivate a practice that conforms with the teachings. So this is where once we take refuge, we've had built enough confidence in the Buddha's teachings. And so then our practice is in alignment with that. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Do not excite your sensory faculties. Sounds dreary, doesn't it? What, no more chocolate? But it's saying don't let our focus on the senses get out of control, because that gets us hooked back into just seeking pleasure and so forth. And because maybe our Dharma study practice, our Dharma commitment is not strong enough to counter that, then we could forget about it altogether. So it's a matter of balance, of saying, yes, I'm still going to enjoy things, but I can enjoy them. And like, for example, when we, once you take the refuge vow, the first portion of food and drink you offer to the Buddhas. I mean, you can do extensive offering to all the beings in all of the 6 realms that they receive as delicious nectar, and go through all the realms. As you can imagine, Lama Zopa, I remember him one time here, and they were having a dinner, and it was 45 minutes of making the offering. Many stories of Rinpoche, like being on a plane and the whole time doing the blessings, and as they're coming into the land, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, so we're going to have to take that away. And he goes, fine, the important bit's done. Take it away. Anyway, we know that we probably won't be spending that amount of time, but we can, everything that we're going to drink, everything that we're going to eat, we have the offering prayer that we do. But even if we don't know the offering prayer, we can, in our minds, Om Ahom, Om Ahom, Om Ahom, we're thinking of it being totally purified and expansive, multiplied on every atom of space, given to all the beings in all the 6 realms, all the gurus, all the beings in the intermediate states, all the Buddhas, and bodhisattvas, in every atom of space, all receiving as delicious nectar, offering to our own Shakyamuni Buddha, our own Buddha nature, receiving that as nectar, and then spreading golden light throughout our body. We experience bliss with every mouthful, for example. That can be a very quick visualization as we go Om Ahom, Om Ahom. Well, quick once we're familiar, and then it becomes, and then enjoy to the heart's content. It's all been transformed. So, do not excite your sensory faculties. I sort of think is don't go to extreme of excitation and so forth. But, it's sort of like, even without drinking, you become drunk just on the excitement. I once had that that just came to mind when I really wanted to go to Lama Zopa Rinpoche's house to make offerings. And I was really, really excited when they said, could you come? Because, there was a nun who was still in retreat. And I was like, yes, I was so excited. But that's a Dharma purpose, right? So there's a different excitement. That's okay. Any Dharma excitement's fantastic. Take up the precepts correctly. In other words, know what the precept is, the vow is, and, keep it correctly. This is why we go through and learn what the downfalls are. Be compassionate towards living beings. So we have all the practices for, wishing sentient beings to be free of suffering. sometimes being compassionate to sentient beings is just spending time with someone who approaches you in the supermarket. I mean, I get approached a bit, maybe more than some people. Car parks, wherever, and just, you know, listen to their story. Yeah, so sorry, you know, just listen. Goes a long way. Many things we can do. That's a whole other teaching. Strive to make periodic offerings to the three jewels. So if we can every day, like once you take refuge, if you have an altar at home, actually this we'll be looking at in the next module, which will be setting up a daily practice. So making offerings, you know, make offerings when there's pujas, or even if you can't get here to make physical offerings, you could, do we have a system for making online offerings? I'm not sure. Go to the website and find out. Make offerings. You can admire the Tara altar that now has these 4 sets of offerings that Geshe Zopa requested or suggested that we have some permanent offerings, so people's mind didn't get negative if they were making the offerings every day and felt it was a job rather than a joy. And so it was a practice. And so we've got those 4 sets of offerings, and Geshe said, you know, replace them every year. So I think Losar, the Tibetan New Year, is a good time to do all of that. In the meantime, we can take great delight. But of course, one can make other offerings. We often see here like Bhutanese or Tibetan or Bahalis coming in and making offerings on the altar over the weekends because that's when they're not working. Yeah. Okay.
Bringing in a bunch of flowers.
Or bringing in a bunch of flowers, yeah. 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 Of course, some of you, I know, are very happily offering service. Actually, I think all of you do. Yeah. Excellent, excellent. You heard that offering service was the best thing, and so you've gone straight to the top. So the benefits of refuge, you are included amongst Buddhists. And again, it's not about a label. It's about what does that mean in terms of my practice, that I'm committing to being this inner being, to developing myself in virtue. You become worthy to uphold all vows. That becomes the foundation for future vows. You reduce and eliminate previously accumulated karmic obstructions. This isn't magic. It doesn't happen immediately, but you've made that intention to do that. And you become aware of, okay, just thinking about when I first took refuge, and after that, I remember one example. I remember a mosquito coming and my hand went automatically to go whack. And I went, you don't do that anymore. Right. So just having that mindfulness, of course, now I don't have to think about it. Now I just sort of watch them taking a little bit of blood and going, that's fascinating. It's so much work for this tiniest drop of, oh, it's a lot of effort on the mosquito's part.
The other thing that worried me, I remember I thought that then I had to keep them perfectly right from the start, and that freaked me out, and you had to give me the chat. This
is why people, you know, may think, oh, I'm not ready, because I think about, I've got to keep it perfectly. But if you think about the root downfalls, given that they're not that hard to keep, I mean, to refrain from, and the rest is a work in progress.
A training.
It's a training, and we get better at it. And because we're reminding ourselves of that every day, if not multiple times a day, then, you know, we get better at avoiding things. Or in my case, I notice the ants on the path. Do I notice each and every ant? Probably not. But they very kindly leave these anthills, like when we go between here and next door, it's like, okay, I can sort of walk like this between
There's a lot of caterpillars around it.
I know, and the caterpillars, yeah. They're harder to detect because, yeah, I know that.
Under the leaves.
Yeah.
I discovered these and put them going, don't eat that. You can go over there.
Yeah, and when you're gardening too, yeah, it's a challenge, isn't it? Yeah.
I was sweeping the
Yes.
there's ant,
Yeah.
but no ants. I
Oh.
didn't see it.
Ah.
Maybe I was looking close.
Maybe the answer relocated.
Changes.
Yeah.
You can actually go sweep the sand back in. All right, got more work.
Yeah. Yeah, just thinking, I hope you're not suffocating. You will accumulate vast merit, as I said, just having the vows without even intentionally refraining from something. As long as we keep the vow, we're getting those blessings. In other words, we're accumulating vast amount of merits just by that in itself. You will not fall into the miserable realms, so lower realms. So that making that commitment to always in future lives have the conditions for a human rebirth. It says higher rebirth, as in also the God realm, but God realm's a bit tricky because you're so blissed out that you don't experience the suffering until you experience the suffering, and then you, yeah. So in a human realm, we know about suffering. We also know that it's possible to be free of it. Thank you to our doctors who have the methods. Yeah. You will not be obstructed by human or non-human hindrances. Again, this is not magic, but the Dharma gives us some protection. So even though, of course, we always encounter obstacles, different difficulties, as Kadrala said, there's no, what is it? Obstacles, only challenges. So again, it's a mental transformation to say, okay, here's an opportunity for me to really put it into practice. Because, of course, we're very good at, keeping up with things, keeping up with practice, making offerings, to all of this, when everything's going smoothly. But as soon as something goes wrong, we go the other way, whereas this is what's going to help us, and we forget about, oh, actually, this is what's going to help us. You will accomplish everything you wish. Given that your aspiration is Buddhahood, you will accomplish. You may even accomplish in this lifetime. Don't cut off the possibility for that. And you will quickly achieve Buddhahood. So you would accomplish everything you wish that accords with virtue, let us say. So when we do, after having taken refuge, of course, as you can see, that's really just the beginning of the rest of our lives as Buddhists. So there are commitments to do certain things, as well as what we refrain from, which we've gone through. So we generally 3 times a day, morning, noon and night at least, remind ourselves that we have taken refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. We have the refuge prayer, like we say at the beginning of this, that, the refuge prayer we recite at the beginning of teachings by relying on the teachings. But in the general refuge prayer, it's relying on giving and the other perfections. So it's, may I develop those 6 perfections. And so we're making those commitments. In the refuge prayer in the Mahayana tradition is refuge and bodhicitta. So it's already incorporated that we have taken a Mahayana refuge. So that's our aspiration. And by reciting that prayer 3 times in the morning, 3 times at night, offering 3 prostrations morning and night, then we're reminding ourselves of that. We're reminding ourselves in the morning, setting our motivation for the day. And in the refuge book, but it's also a section in here, it reminds you, it gives you a nice little daily practice to do that, some of you will be familiar with. the section on refuge. Yes, anyway, page 110, 11, page 111. And there's just, it's not like you have to do all of that. The refuge prayer is a commitment, 3 times in the morning, 3 times in the night. And then it has the 4 measurable thoughts, motivation for life, and dedication to seal what we've already, the practice we've done. So it can be very short. In this book also, there's a more elaborate daily practice on Shakyamuni Buddha, which is quite a wonderful thing, inspiring thing to do. And it comes as a standalone book as well. I think we've got out here in the bookshop. And then going through the commitments after we take refuge, which is in this book here, page 115. So having taken refuge in the Buddha, not taking refuge from the depths of our heart. And we really have to, in other words, it says worldly gods such as Brahmins and so forth, but we can also think of, not therefore going to the Christian faith and saying, okay, now I'm a Christian and a Buddhist. Because why? We're going to get incredibly confused. And we also have to look at what our goal is. If my goal is to attain full enlightenment, not dissing the Christian faith, but that won't get me there, right? Because the reliance on an external God will be very good for leading an ethical life, but not for gaining the realizations in our own mind stream. It's just not taught in that faith. For example, one should not entrust oneself from the depths of one heart to non-virtuous friends. So it doesn't mean, if you've got ratty relatives, to not engage with them. Your engagement may be very beneficial, but we don't want to hang out like, and the guys I was visiting in prison, they would say, you have to make sure I don't go back to the gangs. Well, of course, I said, you have to make sure you don't go back to the gangs. But understanding what, if I get out and go back to the gangs, that's it, it's all gone, So that's the non-virtuous friends. So why? Because our strength in our vows is not strong enough for us to not be swayed by such behaviour.
Oh, those sort of people that say, oh, don't go to the dance.
Or people, yes, that's the other thing. Yes, or the people who try to prevent you from engaging in your spiritual path. Yeah. I suppose a bit tricky if it's one's partner. You have to negotiate. But they're probably not non-virtuous generally. They just want to have some time with you. We have to find the balance. Or teachers of non-Buddhist traditions that have no supporting levels. So we have to be careful that we're not saying don't read, teachings of other spiritual traditions, but from the framework of our Buddhist understanding. If initially you feel like, oh no, that was my previous thing, I want nothing to do with it, that's fine. But later on, when you've got more maturity in the Dharma, you might be interested in like, so what did those desert fathers and mothers do as a meditation practice? But it doesn't mean you're going to become one of those. It just means you're interested to have an understanding. And I think one of our teachers, generally one of our teachers, Alan Wallace, he does a presentation of that in relation to science, and because science historically was supported within the Christian church, then there's a lot of, interesting, writings in that area. And so looking at that, but looking at it from a Buddhist framework. Just like the Dalai Lama was invited to do the teachings by Lawrence Freeman on the Gospels. So Lawrence Freeman's a Christian meditator. When I met him, he said he became a monk to meditate. That was his purpose. So revive the world Christian meditation movement. Anyway, so him and the Dalai Lama, of course, had many interactions, and he asked the Dalai Lama to give a Buddhist commentary on the Gospels. So therefore, you've got to read the Gospels, and you might think, well, nobody's really going to ask me to do that. But could be interesting to read with a Buddhist perspective.
Well, you do multi-faith work.
I do multi-faith work, and it actually, it's not a criticizing any other faith, but it just sort of enhances your conviction in your own tradition, while at the same time recognizing it's people of faith of any tradition who are the ones who are sort of responsible for everybody else. Well, these days it's also combined with multicultural, or at least here in WA it seems to be, like we're going to a talk this afternoon that's for multicultural, but often it is like going along to interfaith events and offering Buddhist prayers, and everyone's doing their own prayer. Okay, that's one level. It's sort of offering prayers. But particularly when I was in Sydney, Women's Interfaith Network, so every year, we'd set a theme for the year, like the role of women in our religion, or mysticism in our religion, or whatever we decided we want to do. Like one year was your favourite prayer. And so we met them every month, and we'd take turns, going and hearing the perspective, hearing that from each of the faith groups. But you weren't allowed to comment on someone else's. So you weren't allowed to comment on someone else's. So instead you're connecting that in a positive way. Oh, yeah, our scriptures say that as well. Or, you're finding that places of commonality and coming together. So that's one way. Another way is the Australian religious response to climate change. So we had some events in Bunbury. Were you there? Yeah. And it's sort of coming together across the different faith groups to say this, or like signing the Uluru Statement from the heart of the major faith group. So there's a lot of different ways of doing that. Yeah. And then also in Sydney, actually I've been asked to do that here. Like in Sydney, it was, what do they call it? Seminary or whatever, where they're training Christian ministers, and they have talks on different faiths. Yeah. So, it's different ways. Yeah. Yes. Having taken refuge in the Dharma, avoid harming any being, either directly by oneself or indirectly by making others do it. I think we've talked about that in relation to killing, but any other harm. Could you tell so-and-so they're, well, I'm not going to say that either.
They're not being helpful.
Well, I guess it could happen in workplaces where there's managerial levels, and that person's got to tell that one rather than it coming from the top.
Yeah.
Ooh, it's pretty graphic.
Sorry, but I don't mean to, but it just.
Yeah.
That's what they say. Yeah, it's exactly what it is.
Yes, the intention is that the person creates the environment for the other person to
Yeah,
Right.
unfortunately. So don't do that. No. It's exactly a good example. It's unfortunate, but they are, well, because they're so unfortunate, it's like, ooh, I don't want to go like that. Having taken refuge in the Sangha, one should avoid entrusting oneself to keeping company with negative friends and followers of hedonism. So we've talked about the negative friends already, the non-virtuous friends. Or negative, don't believe in karma, and then you might be swayed in their direction, etc. And followers of hedonism, in other words, just wanting to have a good time. Nothing wrong with having a good time, but be careful. It's a slippery slope. And then what is to be practiced? Having taken refuge in the Buddha with a mind of respect to the Buddhas, one should regard even statues, we've said, and offer prostrations, pay respects to them. So when you come into the Gompa, for example, we can mentally or, with a mudra, offer our respects to the holy objects in the room. Maybe if you see it in a gardening shop or something, maybe not appropriate, but we can mentally do. Art galleries, lots of places, shops, what do they call them? Design, decor shops. One should avoid showing disrespect for them, placing them on the bare ground. So not only not placing them on the ground, not placing them where your feet are going to point towards them, even if they're on a little, we want them, even if like in the garden, we want them to be raised up. Judging them according to their material value, is what we talked about in terms of artistic design or so forth, or discriminating between them, saying that some are good and others are bad. Having taken refuge in the Dharma, one should pay homage and respect by generating the recognition of all scriptural texts, or even just one syllable of the teachings, as being the rare sublime Dharma. One should avoid placing texts on the bare ground, regarding them as a material object, using them as security for a loan, or carrying them together with one's shoes, because your shoes are what touch the ground. And so therefore, if you put them in with your shoes, in a bag with the shoes, it's like putting them on the ground. And of course, you might see us do here, if we inadvertently drop something on the ground, we go like this, and it's to place it then on the highest part, and the highest part of the body is here. So we do that. Just some, I think I've got some here, examples of that.
That's why we use book bags as well.
It's why we use book bags. So we have, like you've got a book bag there. So a book bag so it's, sure, I know like sometimes in the, centres, people give you a paper bag to take it home with, but we want to actually make it meaningful, like putting it offering it, not thinking that we're offering it the cloth. So we're making that offering. So like all of these up here, the Kangyo, Tengyo, they're all offered cloth, and so we could say the peshas, those big long things, it's a more plain cloth, but then they've got lovely little decorative cloths that we see that makes it happy for our mind when we see the Dharma, when we see the text. Okay, yeah, Rinpoche goes a bit more into this. Putting texts on the floor, stepping over texts. So, for example, if I would be to step over that little table, for example, it's got text on it. So I don't want to step over the top of it. And I, for myself, if I catch a plane and I've got Dharma text in my bag and I'm going to put the bag under the seat in front, I take the Dharma text out and put it in the back of the seat. Actually, more to the point, before I pack, I think about what I can fit in the seat holder, or put it above so that it's not in there. It's not under the seat where somebody else's bottom is. And not putting Dharma text on the seat. So in Vajrayana Institute, actually it was at a refuge ceremony, that Geshe Samta, when he was teaching on this, and said, And so the text shouldn't go on the seat. And of course, we all knew that. And it was like, yeah, but we put them on the seat with one of these text cloths. No.
Still not good enough.
Still not good enough. And actually, of course, he was right, because not only is it still not good enough, yes, they had the text as protection, but when people come in, they don't know that. And I've seen them mostly, why you've done that. And they pick up the text, but sit on the text class because they just don't know. I mean, you have to have some sort of intuitive knowledge to know that thing. So, yeah, not putting them. So I have to say, it took him 10 years to tell us that, and we were all very embarrassed. Well, those of you who've been around for a while were incredibly embarrassed. Not putting something on top of the text, even a mala. Right, and you see there's people put their glasses on top of the text. They put a mala on top of the text. And at the Lamp of the Path, one time, Nick Rebush was, oh, sorry, I'm not meaning to name names, but anyway, the retreat leader had his laptop, put it down, and then put his mala on top. And Rinpoche came and said, "What's that mala doing there?" Because he'd been reading all the Dharma texts from here, right? And so even that then becomes, you don't think about, oh, that's a Dharma text, but what have I got open? Dharma, 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 Dharma.
And our notes are Dharma too, aren't they?
Yes, yeah, our notes are Dharma too. So we have to just be very, very mindful with that. Yeah, so not putting those things on top of your notebook either, because you've got your notebook for Dharma, right?
I keep my laptop in a book bag.
Gold star, you. No, it's a practice of mindfulness, like with hard drives. Rinpoche would say, put the hard drive elevated, you know. Don't put the hard drive on the ground, computers, because it's interesting, because you don't think like that. You think, well, that's all out there. And then I've got to think, is that only because I'm a Dharma practitioner and so I'm going to be looking at those things because they're sort of out there anyway? Do you know what I mean? It's there anyway. It's interesting, isn't it? I think I know what Rinpoche's answer would be. But given that I'm a Dharma practitioner, I know that on my computer what things are open. So
you have to know these things.
You have to know, yes.
And then
but it's having heard to be mindful. This is why you have to hear these things.
And then it can shift your attention.
Yes.
Every day.
Yes, that's right.
They're all mindfulness
Yeah.
practices.
Like, for example, like at Chenrezig Institute, if we're in the Gompa, I wouldn't walk over somebody else's bag because it probably has Dharma text in it. I don't really know whether it does or not, but most likely you're in the Gompa, you're studying, they've got their notebook, they've got something in there. So not putting on the seat, not putting something on top. Okay, not marking a text with an attitude that it's merely material. Rather, you are offering the colour to the text. You know, I was brought up, my mother brought us up to don't ever put a mark on any book.
Yeah,
whatsoever. These things are really handy, these. But, you know, I will, you know, for teaching purposes, not in here, but I might put pencil marking, read from here to here, or sometimes I use the stickies. But Rinpoche is saying you can offer the colour. So say you were highlighting, you're offering colour to the text. So, and Rinpoche himself would have his own post-it notes and writings, and I saw that with Geshe Santen there. Now he uses his laptop, but he was having writings on the text. So you're thinking you're offering that, you know, that colour to the text, right? So you haven't lost the sense of the value of that. In fact, it's because you value it that you're making those, right? So we just have to be careful. Otherwise, we're creating the cause to be born in the black line hell. All these lines, and you cut up along those. Yeah. Many times a day.
Well, as soon as you revive again, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the reviving hells, yeah. don't wrap up texts as if they were pieces of luggage rather than the attitude of offering them cloth. Now, maybe this is Rinpoche reminding to his attendants, because when Rinpoche was traveling, at least 2 of the however many suitcases would be full of texts. So, don't just think, oh, there's another luggage. Think about them. That again, you're offering them cloth, you're offering them the case. These actions, these actions of abandoning the Dharma by not seeing even one letter as advice. So Rinpoche says in regard to Tibetan texts, when we've got Tibetan writing, even like the Tibetan newspaper, he said, that is Dharma. Now, why would Rinpoche say that? Because the Tibetan language was actually developed for Dharma, for a Dharma purpose. So the intention of it is a Dharma purpose. Even it's in the newspaper talking about something else. This is getting really mindful. I don't have any Tibetan newspapers. But it does make you think about other words in Tibetan and just even one syllable of that text. Yes. So these actions of abandoning Dharma, not even seeing one letter as advice, cause obstacles to your realizations. And the karma is heavier than having destroyed all the statues on earth. Also, not using saliva to turn the pages. And Rinpoche talked about that he used to do that. And then he heard that as an instruction, went, oh, of course. And so he stopped. So, we're,
Yeah, we don't need to be perfect.
We don't need to be perfect. That's true. Not respecting, okay. We'll pick it up and put it in a high place, in a neat, clean place, separate from other texts of other religious points of view, like other religions. Otherwise, if we muddle it up, the mind will have unclear concentration and obstacles to generate clear and stable faith in the right view. And as was said earlier, not putting up texts for deposit so here we have we have Dharma texts which you can, purchase in the bookshop. But again, we have to think as that's making an offering to the Dharma, because the money that from Dharma texts goes to Dharma texts. So it has to be particularly kept apart for Dharma. Any money that comes in for the Dharma can only be used on the Dharma. And then this goes through the realizations that come from receiving the qualities of the Dharma. Then in relation to the Sangha, this is what to refrain from. Causing disunity in the Sangha. You might think, I'm not a Sangha member, this doesn't relate to me, but it could be if we were to criticize Theravadan or even other Mahayana traditions or so forth, is that danger of causing a split. Oh, don't go there because it's blah, blah. Go here. It's okay to say go here, but criticizing the other is causing a disunity in the Sangha. Yes, you can.
With this new tradition,
Yes.
I think there's
Oh, you can advise people not to go to inauthentic traditions. In fact, we have an obligation to do that, really.
yeah.
But the way we,
Because it come up a few times when a friend was thinking, oh, maybe I should, there's a meditation center.
yeah.
You know, what do you,
I know it's a
I'm
hard
not sure
what to say. You could say that, you know, they don't. They don't follow the Dharma, Dalai Lama's advice. You know, they may not all be against the Dalai Lama. So I was going to say that, but some are, but they don't follow the Dalai Lama's advice. Therefore, I don't go there. And then it's up to them to decide. I mean, I always say, in like amongst people who are real beginners of, if you don't see in a Tibetan Buddhist center an image of the Dalai Lama, not only do we have an image, we have a throne and all of that, but an image of the Dalai Lama, then it's probably not an authentic tradition. So I do say that in general, of course, you know, yeah, because your friend wanting to go there to learning to meditate, fine, and that practice they do fine. It's only the fact that they do the Shugden practice, and that's against the Dalai Lama's advice for good reason, because it's a disturbing energy. Which is why the Dalai Lama said, don't do this, you know, because the energy is harmful. And people do because it feels powerful. And then they think they're powerful, and that's the danger. But it actually is a negative energy. Yeah, it goes way back to the time of Guru Rinpoche. So, yeah, so I would just say that. For my mind, even though, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, other practices they do are fine, but I find by association, and it's like, yeah, that might take me that far, but then if they're still engaging in these practices that have all these negative consequences, and Holiness is kindly given that advice not to do that, then as Lama Zopa says, don't even sit at the same table. Those who do the practice, don't invite them into your house, don't offer them a cup of tea, don't sit at the same table, don't be in the same gompa as them.
They also demonstrated things to follow.
Yeah, they previously, yes, when His Holiness visited here and elsewhere, no doubt, big demonstrations. It was terrible. That's right.
It's not aware of
Yeah.
on it.
Because
From outward appearance, it looks like, oh, they're the same.
Well, it looks the same, you know, if they're, and that's the other thing to know is that those, and this you could say, is that those who are dressed in robes aren't following an authentic ordination lineage. So there's only a couple of authentic lineages, and they go all the way back to the Buddha. So you have to be able to, as ordained Sangha, have to be able to show that authentic lineage. And so this is why, like in the Australian Sangha Association, we don't allow them to be members. Because they don't have that authentic lineage. They've got their own thing going on, shall we say. So that's another reason. And you might feel uncomfortable with that, because how would I know about what their lineage is? But it means that I refuse to call them monks and nuns. I call them those who are wearing those robes, because they're not.
But it wouldn't mean that from our point of view, they want it to be our spiritual teacher.
Yes.
Because of the lineage issue.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it would mean that. Yeah. And the confusion is because it's new Kadampa tradition, and we talk about the Kadampa tradition as the precedent to the Gelugpa, Lama Tsongkhapa Kadampa tradition. So, our minds can get confused and you think, oh, Kadampa tradition, oh, that sounds good. You don't know. So, yeah, it's very confusing for folks. Yeah. I mean, you could just say, oh, I've heard it's not a good place to go. I mean, that's keeping it simple without all this explanation. Yeah. It's a very tricky one, yeah. So this is where we have to be careful, and this is what the Buddha also advised against, because even at the time of the Buddha, there was, the shoddy brothers, sisters, thinking of both, Devadatta, the jealous Devadatta, and trying to, because he was jealous because Shakyamuni Buddha was getting all these followers and he wasn't. So there were, you see it in Maitreya's teachings as well, giving those warnings against those who aren't, sort of following an authentic tradition, shall we say. Yeah.
Something for this teaching your own version. Seen it somewhere.
Yeah. Well, this is why we also, any teachings, we give the reference to where that has come from. Mm-hmm. And so by deduction, you can say, okay, whether it's Amitabha Rinpoche, then it's following the Dalai Lama, then, tracking back and so forth. So this is why it's really important to have that. And if someone can't say where that's come from, which they can't probably in that tradition, because all the texts are all by the one person. Whereas we say, read widely, read broadly, read the different commentaries to get a different perspective.
Traditions like individuals set up. There are all traditions that are set up on the tradition.
He set up the Plum Village tradition, but then he would, you can still trace back Thich Nhat Hanh and so forth in the Mahayana tradition, right? And so it's a matter of investigation of the qualities of the teacher, and if they can show that authentic lineage, right? Yeah. Yeah, because that does raise a good point. I wouldn't know within the Plum Village whether they only read teachings by Thich Nhat Hanh. Maybe. I'm not sure. But actually whether he set up, but it's this whole, there are other organizations that are engaged Buddhism. So really what he set up was engaged Buddhism. But there are other engaged Buddhism who don't necessarily follow Thich Nhat Hanh tradition as well. So we just have to be careful and ask the questions. And that's why I'd say that, simplest thing for me, if I don't see an image of the Dalai Lama, I'll say, why not? If they say, oh, we've been, we don't, it'd be very hard to find a reason why you wouldn't have one in the Tibetan tradition, because you could just print one off, even if you didn't have a lot of money, and still have one. Or they're a study group who has no idea, oh, should we have one? Yes, okay, we will. Beginners. Yeah. And I guess, the other thing, just thinking about the NKT, is that they're very good on the Google SEOs, search engine optimization. Because, if you're looking for where to meditate in Perth, whammo, that'll be the first thing you see. Yeah. All right, shall we leave it there for today? So This brings us to a conclusion of this module. I do recommend reading more this Going for Refuge. That in Pabonka Rinpoche Liberation of Palm has a wonderful section on refuge if you haven't read that already. Yeah. We can dedicate our prayers, practice all that we have been contemplating so far. The third verse down, page 16, I think everyone's there before me. Through the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the precious body mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forever more. Page 19. Long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Page 23, long life prayer for Tenzin also. Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred and judicious essence of Buddha's teachings, O foremost and holy Lama, to you who are supreme. O Lama, please, please live long. And then the swift return prayer for Lama Zopa Rinpoche by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious one, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losine father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings. Through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request, while striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge. And for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the oceans of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Thanks very much, everyone.